We'll make sure that you cannot then. Ladies, please. Can you slowly go and see? If everyone has one, that will be great. And I need one as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
You see, the men are pretenders. I talk about something that I've not even tasted. You see, tonight, yeah. Ariana is missing. Ariana, where are you? Ah, I know. They are. You know where she is? No, Ariana, she's in another session, and probably she's
Okay. She can join us, no problem.
yes. You can start. Okay. Okay. Good. Noah, can you talk?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh yeah. Good afternoon, Noah. Good afternoon. Okay, it works. It works. Thank you.
Great.
It works. Okay. Right. So we should have Ariana, but we start. Okay. Do you know where Ariana is? Ariana? Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes. Where we can start. Yeah, okay. Just 30 seconds. No, just one. No, only. Um, But he knows he will come. Yes, yes, yes. That's fine. That's fine. Right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on micro-credentials in the global tertiary education space and their impact on quality assurance. So micro-credentials may be micro in name, but their global impact is anything but small, and they're multiplying everywhere. As the landscape of higher education evolves, so to do the ways in which learning is delivered, recognized, validated, and quality assured. So today's session will bring together a range of perspectives from universities, quality assurance agencies, governments, and UNESCO to explore how regulations and quality assurance can or should keep pace with the rise of micro-credentials. We are joined today by distinguished experts who will each share their take on this fast-developing phenomenon and helping us map not only where we are with the micro-credentials, but where we may go next. So let me briefly introduce our outstanding panel of experts. This panel will be chaired by Olgun Cikcek, consultant, expert, and researcher in quality assurance, and INQUAHI board director, international advisor to the Turkish Higher Education Quality Council, and as you may know already, chair of this conference organizing committee. Kyusuke Nagata, president of Japan Association of National Universities of Japan, former president of the University of Tsukuba, and a key figure in shaping Japan's higher education reform, and who was keynoter this morning. Arianna De Vicenzi, INQUAHI board member and vice rector for academic affairs at the Inter-American Open University in Argentina, and she's INQUAHI board director representing Latin America and the Caribbean. And Arianna leads the membership and communication committee, and she has played a key role in delivering INQUAHI's micro-credential training in collaboration with RealCup, which is a major and big association of private universities in Latin America, composed of some 1,000 private institutions. Mary Catherine Lennon, board director at INQUAHI, head of research and international project at the Post-Education Quality Assessment Board, PECAB, in Ontario, Canada. Mary Cath is also chairing the INQUAHI Committee for Capacity Building and Research. And in Ontario, she has been deeply involved in the professional framework for quality assurance in micro-credentials. Leah Matthews, CEO of the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, DEAC, in the USA, and leading expert on the development and regulation of micro-credentials in that country, and Leah is the treasurer of INQUAHI. We have then Sylvia Demas, Deputy Director of the Namibian National Council for Higher Education, and she holds several executive positions at the African Network, SACAN and African, INQUAHI board, and actively engaged with us in the preparations of the INQUAHI Forum 2026, which will take place in South Africa. And then we have online Noah Sob. Noah is the chief of the section for higher education at the UNESCO. UNESCO, and particularly Noah, has become a key partner in our growing collaboration on the recognition of qualifications and global frameworks, bringing the UNESCO perspective into this conversation. With no further ado, I pass over to Olgun, and I wish you a fruitful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Fabrice, for this introduction, and we welcome you all. I think it's going to be an interesting panel because the topic is very hot, and we have got wonderful experts to share their experience from different regions, different countries, and different institutions' perspective. And then we'll try to be precise with the time, and also to give some time for Q&A and your comments, because I know everyone has a lot to say about micro-credentials. I think we'll start with dear Noah as the first speaker. So please set the ground for us, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ogun. Let me share my screen here, as I want to show a few slides. Let's see. Can you just confirm that that's coming through okay?
We can.
Great. So
kindly remind you, you have 10 minutes, if you don't mind.
I'll keep to it.
Okay, let's see how it goes. Thank you.
Let's see how it goes. It's a challenge. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation, the opportunity to be part of this conversation today. My apologies that I'm not with you in person in Tokyo, but it's a great honor to be on this panel with such amazing expertise that's been assembled. You know, on the side of UNESCO, we really appreciate the work of Nkwahe, the substantial contributions you're making to the field through the networking, the standards development work. You know, particularly thankful for some of the work you've done, for example, with our Bangkok office. And as Fabrice said, this is an important and growing partnership. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing at UNESCO on micro-credentials. But maybe spend most of the time talking about some of the opportunities and risks that come with micro-credentials, as I was asked to sort of start off with some thoughts. And I think all of these opportunities and risks really point directly at the importance of quality assurance. You know, in keeping with our global standard setting mandate, UNESCO is doing a lot of what we call normative work and trying to set common definitions and standards for micro-credentials. Now, this is occurring across our various offices, at our headquarters here in Paris, where I sit, also at our institutes such as EASALC in Venezuela, UIL in Germany, and I know some of you work closely with those folks. I'm worried that I'm going to repeat something that's already been said a number of times in Tokyo already today, but you know, we see micro-credentials as typically focused on a specific set of learning outcomes in a narrow field of learning and achieved over a shorter period of time. You know, typically a micro-credential documents some sort of achievement on the part of the learner, and this documentation comes from some sort of entity that's properly qualified to validate that achievement. So, I mean, I think it's important for us to remember a micro-credential is an educational record. Typically, it includes some sort of fair assessment or proving up on the part of the learner, and of course, an assessment that's based on clearly defined standards. You know, and optimally, of course, and I think this is the work that everyone in the room is engaged with, the curriculum, instruction, learning, assessment practices, all of that that lead to a micro-credential are quality assured.
Sorry, no, the
yes.
slide's not moving. If there is any technical issue or you didn't start yet, sorry for that.
No, I've started, but the slide's about to move. Thank you. No worries.
Okay,
no worries.
thank you.
I know my timing. I'm gonna do it. Don't worry. Okay, let's.
You have extra 2 minutes. Don't worry. Thank you.
No, that's okay. I won't take more time. You know, I think just quickly, you know, there's these, I think, are two standard reasons that are put forward for why micro-credentials are attractive. Fabrice mentioned kind of the rise of this. One is flexible learning pathways. You know, two is what it brings for lifelong learning. You know, I think from the part of governments, you know, many see this as a tool for reducing unemployment, for reskilling, you know, for matching educational opportunities at higher levels with a rapidly changing world. And also widening access to higher education. You know, I think we see at the institutional level, certainly a revenue generating motivation, but also a value seen, that through micro-credentials, institutions can be increasingly relevant, flexible, and deliver necessary skills and education for learners at all stages and all levels of their professional lives. From the perspective of UNESCO, we see micro-credentials as having considerable promise for expanding higher education as a global common good, as a public endeavor that serves individuals, communities, countries, indeed the world, to help people live lives of purpose that contribute to making the world peaceful, just, and sustainable. I think I think the arguments, it's worth spending some time thinking about why we're doing this, but I want to move on to thinking about some of the challenges and risks that we need to address in our work. These are things UNESCO is thinking about, and I know that all of you in the room are thinking about them too. And some of this will be familiar. So one of the challenges we need to overcome is a fragmentation of learning. This is the worry that micro-credentials will, in effect, carve off, privilege a subset of narrow, very context-specific skills, peeling that off away from well-thought-out programs of study, that feature maybe more global, critical, creative, possibly transversal skills, typical in well-conceived, well-designed programs of study. So I think we need to be attentive to that risk. Another risk that I think we need to be attentive, and to give away where we're going, I think quality assurance mechanisms are key in mitigating and addressing all of these. But I think we need to be aware of the risk that we are possibly devolving onto learners responsibilities and risks that need also to be socially managed. It's very important that learners know what opportunities are provided by certain credentials. And for that, we need strong public, robust systems, that assess those opportunities. There is a third risk, that micro-credentials could in fact exacerbate inequalities. Many of you will know the research on MOOCs, it's mixed, but some of the research shows that rather than widening access, they're actually giving additional credentials to those who are already highly skilled. Okay, on the one hand, this isn't a problem. It's a way of enhancing lifelong learning. But if we're marching this out under a banner of expanding access and we're using public resources in that direction, then it does become a problem. The other piece is just to think about, the core missions of higher education, which are typically understood as a triple mission that combines teaching, research, and community engagement, and think about ways that a focus on micro-credentials work can fit within that constellation. At UNESCO, we work in a variety of ways on all these issues. One is definitional. Some of you will know towards our common definition publication. I've seen some of you at other convenings that we've had. We're also working at the country level, developing national frameworks. And we're also, engaging in spaces like this and partnering with Nkwahe to advance some of this. I also, want to just present what we're trying to take through this mobilization of convening, standard setting, and technical assistance. One is a call, to integrate micro-credentials effectively into existing higher education systems. I think that complementarity and working in with traditional degree programs, seems to be one of the most productive ways forward. We can get into conversations about how micro-credentials can be stacked, et cetera. At UNESCO, we also recommend that countries establish comprehensive national qualifications frameworks. We've seen this as a way that is effective for recognizing and aligning micro-credentials with formal education pathways, and in fact, expanding those pathways. Of course, quality assurance mechanisms that ensure credible, transparent, consistent, recognition of these qualifications of micro-credentials is important. Again, I think I'm preaching to the choir, but a key piece of this is improving the information that's available to learners so that they can confidently select and pursue micro-credential learning opportunities. I think there's also a really important part from the research and data collection world on the impacts of micro-credentials, that we all need to commit to, and that's definitely something we're leaning into at UNESCO. Of course, across this, needs to be, I think, a commitment to access, inclusive and equitable access. We're leaning into encouraging people to and inviting people to engage, with the policy, professional communities of practice that are connected, with our recognition conventions. The broad point here is, I think, international cooperation on these issues, which Inkwahe is realizing beautifully. So to close, I just want to mention, if you're not familiar with it, we'd be happy to talk more about UNESCO's work on the global and regional conventions. This is recognizing the need for qualifications acquired through non-traditional learning modes, also partial qualifications, to be properly, transparently, fairly recognized. And it also supports and connects to a major commitment of UNESCO, of supporting education as a global common good, maybe most notably put forward in the 2021 Futures of Education report, which notes that individuals have a basic right to have their learning recognized and validated, even in non-formal and formal education settings, which of course takes micro-credentials into new directions. So I will close there, I think just at 11 minutes. Thanks very much.
You are great. Thank you. Thank you. I think you are great in terms of setting the scene as well as respecting the time. Thanks, Noah. Really appreciate it. Wonderful. Okay, so now let's quickly jump into the famous micro-credentials topic. We all say that it's booming. Everywhere it's really a hot topic. But really, I will start with a figure from ECAR that I got a couple of weeks back. In their DECAR, the register database, there are only 23 micro-credentials programs listed or as accredited out of 110,000 programs. So this is maybe an irony or an indication that, yes, they are booming, but in terms of quality assurance, still it's like a baby step. So that's one thing to remind before we kick off. I would like to start with the first question of, okay, is it booming in your places, in your region, in your country? And are the higher education stakeholders engaged with micro-credentials? Yes or no? If yes, most probably yes. Is there a framework, policy, and planning by the authorities to regulate or to really support the micro-credentials? So that's the first round of question. I would like any one of you to start. Ariana, yes, you raised the hand first. Thank you. And the time is really limited. I'm sorry to remind a few times, but 3 to 5 minutes, let's say, for each. Minutes. Okay.
Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, in Latin American and Caribbean region, I may say that since after pandemic, since 2020, there was a rise in growing interest in micro-credentials, and especially among universities. That's why I would say that there is an underrepresented information about how many micro-credentials are really being offered, because even there are universities that has their own digital platform to provide micro-credentials. At least in my country, and I know that in the United States it's the same, there are many universities that are developing their own micro-credentials by their own platforms. So perhaps if you just count on MOOCs started in 2008. So since then, up to now, things have changed a lot. And we are talking about something really different. And UNESCO have introduced a common definition of micro-credential that is really different from what a MOOC means in 2008. So saying that, I must say that universities are one of the main providers in partnership with productive sectors, but especially in partnership with digital platforms. And that came Coursera, edX, that are the most popular ones. But as I said, there's not all what is there, it's really micro-credentials. So probably there are many short-term programs, but they are called micro-credentials and they're really not micro-credentials. So maybe we should take it into account what is a micro-credentials in terms of a standalone value program. That's very important, that it's really focused to learning outcome, that has a robust assessment, and that it's aligned to quality assurance. And those 4 components for us is very important in order to understand what is and so what is not a micro-credential. Saying that, and other stakeholders are, for our region, non-traditional students. I'm talking about people from over 30 years old that have unemployed, that they are from low income background, and their strongest motivation is social mobility because they are already employed. So they need to improve their career and they need upskilling and reskilling. Also, we have identified some regulators, not many. Colombia has just started, one country has just started. Uruguay also started with something. Chile started. In the Caribbean region, Jamaica is strong with micro-credentials, and also some of the training agencies that are working under the framework of the training qualification framework. So these are the main stakeholders. But let me introduce very briefly some of the reasons why I think that this will still increase in terms of what are the needs that we are identifying in our region. First, I've taken some notes not to forget anything, disparities in the access. You know that in our region, we have increased our enrollment 7 times in the last 30 years, 7 times. In 1995, we have just 5 million students. Right now, we are almost 35 million students at universities. But disparities are really very clear. Only 10% of the population coming from lowest income are enrolled at university. So, as it was said by Noah, I took notes, micro-credentials should be flexible pathway to ensure inclusive and equitable access. That's very important, and that's one of our most important challenges, to expand access to higher education. Second, post-pandemic shift. After pandemic, the dropout rate increased, while the interest in traditional degree decreased. So students don't want to study content-based, time-based programs. They want competence-based, learning outcome-based, aligned to labor market needs. So that's another reason why micro-credentials are increasing. Educational achievement gaps. You know, UNESCO SHAM report 2022 said that in our region, only 44% of our active economic population have completed high school. Only 44% of our active economic population have completed high school, and only 17% have a university degree. So, where are all those people underrepresented? What are we going to offer to them, you know? They can't afford 4 years program. It's a lot for them. They need something else, learning flexible pathway. That's a good answer for them.
Thank you. And how is the regulation, the policy makers or the Q agencies' engagement? Is there a framework?
Not at all. Actually,
Not
we are,
not available.
no one knows. We are working with Yasak. He was there in the meeting in Uruguay when we launched the office there. We were very proud to have very next to us now a new office from UNESCO. They are doing a great job in order to analyze what is happening about quality assurance of micro-credentials. So UNESCO is trying to develop some guidelines for the region in order to create a framework so that they can use to develop these micro-credentials that are increasing, really increasing in many universities.
Noah, we expect a lot from UNESCO, as you see, so thank you. I appreciate. I think Leah, would you continue your elaboration?
Thank you, Ariana, for sort of pointing out the parity of situations across the globe. In the United States, we're looking at micro-credentials as a way to address a gap in opportunity and access to higher education, which the hope is that a micro-credential will build confidence in the learner, create a pathway, perhaps interoperability of what they may learn in a micro-credential that can be applied to a degree, and certainly the pathway into the workforce, right, is such a very important outcome. When you ask about what kind of stakeholder engagement is taking place, and that's such an important question. I mean, as educators, we can talk a lot about micro-credentials, but without the engagement of our governments, our legislative and regulatory processes, we can't really have a coherent national strategy. I am from the United States, and I can say that in this case, for micro-credentials, I think there's a lot of important unified strategy being discussed. And one is the recognition of financing a micro-credential. And through members of Congress right now, there's pending legislation called the Short-Term Pell and Jobs Act that would provide financing for programs of study, a credential as short as 600 clock hours and 8 weeks in length, just to give an individual the financial backing they may need to get into a micro-credential, short learning activity.
Accredited also.
I want to get to the accreditation topic. Accreditation in the United States is widely decentralized. It's not a government function. It's carried out by private organizations. And for the colleges and universities that have accreditation in the United States, if that institution offers a micro-credential, it's automatically folded into the accreditation status. However, also in the United States are providers of educational content that are not a college or university, are not part of the accredited system in the US. The response to that question of quality assurance in a micro-credential has been addressed by two organizations. One is my organization, the DEAC. We offer a review of a micro-credential by a third-party provider, not a university or college, where we give very focused attention to the curriculum, the learning outcomes, the suitability for that learning in a distance education environment, the assessment of student learning, and then how that aligns appropriately with the objective of a workplace. The second organization that is also taking a look at this is the Higher Learning Commission. Many of you are probably familiar with the largest institutional accreditor in the United States, and that's the HLC. They are launching a credential lab endorsement framework that is also looking at these micro-credentials, these units of learning that are not organized by a university or college, offered by a third party, sort of along the same lines as a micro-credential that we've been talking about. So, these are just some initial strategies that we're trying to implement in the United States. Of course, it's not across the spectrum. These are just early ideas, Olgan.
And God knows what will happen tomorrow. So let's finger cross. And Marikat, maybe since we are in the North American part, and any guidance from Canada?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thanks to my colleagues. It's great to hear the variety of ways in which micro-credentials are being considered by different jurisdictions and incorporated into them. There was a large push within the province of Ontario as part of Canada, but has a unique and distinct system. It's provincially run. And where we started back in 2022, it really came from the government that there was a push for micro-credentials, recognizing the potential to reskill and upskill the labor market, the labor force. And so in that, the government provided opportunities to institutions to develop micro-credentials, as well as to students to provide financial assistance to engage in these micro-credentials. Part of the process for recognition of the micro-credentials was that there was a quality assurance review of the micro-credentials. As a government, they made that statement, but did not necessarily have any sort of plan to enact quality assurance. And so my agency at the Post-Secondary Education Quality Assessment Board, we were asked to create a framework that would be able to quality assure micro-credentials. And so what we recognized was that there was a great amount of focus on the universities and the colleges that were providing micro-credentials. But we also know that industry and employers are significant providers of micro-credentials. And when we think about access issues and equity issues, it's the lower income individuals that are actually going to these unrecognized providers for their educational needs. And so in order to have some learner protection, we thought that ensuring that all micro-credentials were qualified in a way that gave learners recognition and legitimacy of their programming would be based on a broad framework that would be based on a qualifications framework. We have an Ontario qualifications framework, and there's some debate right now as to whether or not this would be a standalone micro-credential quality framework or integrated into our learning, our qualification framework. But the notion is that when that is done and when that leveling of recognition for the micro-credentials is established and is recognized by all providers, that there will be that learner protection and the legitimacy of the programming. Our intention is that, I say intention because we are waiting any day for the ministry to endorse the model and to ask us to move forward with it. But the notion is that our institutions have very substantially reviewed internal quality assurance mechanisms, and we feel that they are best placed to actually review micro-credentials. They have the learning outcomes expertise, they know what good curriculum looks like, they know how to engage employers, and they know how to deal with assessments. Particularly for employers and industry who have content knowledge, but don't necessarily have that curriculum development potential or skill set, we think that partnering them with institutions to ensure that the actual education of a micro-credential is solid and quality assured is critical. So by leaving the quality assurance mechanism in the hands of the institutions, we think that we'll be able to really support that access and equity issue of micro-credentials.
Thank you. We'll discuss more about the quality assurance perspective in the second round. Sylvia, yes, let's hear the African experience, please. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Olugun. In the African region, just like elsewhere, as the colleagues have indicated, the countries are increasingly embracing the potential of micro-credential for the reasons that have been mentioned since the morning, the lifelong learning, employability skills, and also providing opportunity, flexible learning models to those who, either the youth who have who need to upskill or reskill, or those who have not been previously exposed to formal education. There was a situation analysis conducted in 2021 among the professionals who are responsible for the development of the African Continental Qualification Framework. And while they did acknowledge that micro-credential was fairly a new concept in the region, they could identify initiatives or activities that are similar to micro-credential, and this include credit-bearing short courses and part qualifications, but they did acknowledge that they are not necessarily micro-credential, but it is not something that is quite new in the continent. Since then, many governments and institutions in the region have now taken interest and are engaging in activities leading to the development of either national or institutional micro-credential frameworks. Most countries in Africa, in my region, at the moment, they are still at the situation analysis or foundation planning stages, but there are those that are already in the pilot implementation stage, and these include Mauritius, Mozambique, and some universities in South Africa and in Kenya. Since I'm also sitting here as the head of the network, I would like to just an opportunity to little bit zoom into what we are doing in the Southern African region or sub-region.
As the agency, you mean?
Network.
Oh, network, yes, please.
Network, yeah, I'm here as representing Africa,
Thank
Southern
you.
Africa, and Namibia. But I will end at the network. In terms of in the Southern African region, we are 4 countries in the region, that is Lesotho, Mauritius, Namibia, and South Africa. We are participating in a project with partners from Europe. It's an EU-funded project, and that is a project coined Potential of Micro-Credentials in Southern Africa. Under this project, we are exploring the potential of micro-credentials in the region. It is rooted in a collaborative approach, in which is engaging the academia, the industry, and the governments. And through this project, we aim, or the ultimate goal is really to develop a regional framework for micro-credential, while the participating country should also emerge with national micro-credential frameworks. The key findings that we have, that this study or that this work have revealed so far, is that the reasons for exploring micro-credentials across the Southern African region is mainly because of high youth unemployment, and also because of the persistent inequalities in access to education. And these reasons, coupled with some systematic conditions like imbalances in infrastructural distribution, are actually infrastructure and including digital division are actually guiding the concepts that are being developed. And therefore, there is a consensus that the framework that is developed in the region and in individual countries should take into consideration, these realities that exist in the different countries.
Thank you, Sylvia. And we'll continue in the second round. Before I go to host country, I think Noah has to leave. So based on discussions so far, if you have some closing remarks, and then we really thank you for joining and contributing all this valuable information. Looking forward to hearing more from UNESCO and yourselves and meeting in some other occasions, Noah. Please.
No, thanks very much, Ogun and colleagues. No, this is an inspiring conversation. We're certainly feeling the burden of the work, but I would say it's shared work we need to do together. I mean, one thing that stands out to me, particularly as I know you're going to go on to talk about, sort of the changing environment with the rise of non-academic providers and, the stackability of micro-credentials, is the point about learner protection, that Dr. Lennon mentioned. I mean, just so important for all of us to work together on that. So I'll close with that, and I'm going to stop looming over you.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much.
Wish
Really
you well.
appreciate
Thank you very much.
See you next time. Okay, now the host country. So let's hear the Japan experience, and we'll be happy to hear your experience and your case or success stories or challenges, dear President.
Actually, when we discussed about the micro-credential, well, I'm very much disappointed in the Japanese higher education system, though. I summarized that. Actually, Dr. So already summarized the merit and challenges around that micro-credential system. Okay, in Japan, we understand the usability or usefulness of the micro-credential for learners. However, the problem is several problems there. Okay, Japanese university prefer diploma and degree to how much the learner learns or understand. The Japanese university prefer continuity to fragmented something. Japanese university prefer authorized something to self-organized something. And they prefer the systematic system to self-organized system. So Japanese universities likes some very classic. And so that they understand the usability, but still they cannot do anything, not so extent of the micro-credential system. So why this happened? Because the cost and performance ratio and the micro-credential could not be high enough for university, for learners, because the Japanese society never understand that how much learners learn or understand some academic matters. They just want to a diploma or degree. That's a problem. That's the same reason why a number of the working adult student is not increasing in Japan compared to the OECD average. Probably we are last countries in that line. So that we have the problem. We understand that the merit of that this micro-credential system, but at least cost and performance ratio is not good enough in Japan.
It does not exist at all, you mean?
Not really good.
Oh dear. Interesting.
It's my opinion. I'm sorry,
Okay.
the Japanese guys, but
No,
probably
maybe
this-
good. We don't know. We'll
yeah,
see
this is
after the
very
discussion.
important point, though. So we have to change our system to the what kind of the degree you have to how much you run or how much you equip. So that this problem is a very good
Thank you.
issue for Japanese universities. Thank you very much.
I think your job is easier, so you don't have to struggle with them. Take it as an advantage. Thank you very much for this open and really clear guidance. Okay, so let's go quickly to second round, and then we'll hand over to our colleagues to share their questions and comments as well. The second question is, what are the implications for quality assurance practices? Should we revise our approach given the rise of non-academic providers and the stackability of micro-credentials into full programs? I think that's major challenge. Are new standards or innovative QA methods needed? Before I hand over, I would like to highlight the previous comments of 23 micro-credentials programs by ECAR. Out of that, more than half is by Coursera and IBM. So a few agencies practicing this in Europe. I'm talking about European context. So that's also an indication of that they are there, but maybe not the higher education institutions or the agencies. So please, anyone would like to take the lead? Leah? Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead,
I'd be glad
please.
to,
Sure,
because
sure.
quality assurance in the US is experimenting around the micro-credential. It's complicated because an educational offering in the US isn't eligible for accreditation unless one of the states has authorized that entity to award the credential. Without authorization from one of the 50 states, Canada not included, okay? But if you're not authorized by a state to operate as an educational provider, you're not eligible to apply for accreditation. And so that's why organizations like the DEAC and the Higher Learning Commission have developed special processes for the non-academic, the non-institutional providers of these micro-credentials and content. And we're sort of scaling the quality assurance process to smaller units of learning and looking through a different lens at that with some consistencies in practice of sound curriculum, qualified instructors, student learning assessment, outcomes assessment, but at the same time, these are not full-blown universities, so we're not going to be looking at libraries, facilities, a deep dive into strategic planning, those types of things that accreditation explores. So we're trying to apply maybe a micro accreditation or micro quality assurance to the micro credential. Again, appropriate in scale, acknowledging resources and time and appropriateness to the process for micro credential review.
Thank you. I like micro accreditation concept, but we'll see.
On the spot.
Ariana? Please. Maybe also I can add that does QA agencies pursue micro-credentials as an extra burden for them? Would that be another
Of
reason?
course.
Yeah,
At
go
least
ahead.
in my region, that everything is under the umbrella of a national qualification agency, of course. Of course, not only for the agencies, but also for the universities, you know. But as I told you, we don't have yet a national, neither a regional external quality assurance framework, even though, if I may say what I think, for me, it's very important, the internal quality assurance system, because we are thinking about a proposal aligned to a context that is in constantly change, no? We are in what I said, ever-changing context. So we might think about something that it has to be flexible, same as our micro-credentials. So flexible evaluation criteria. So we may first consider which is the normalized information that's required, for example, when you talk about the standard for digital badge. There's some normalized information that it's required for being embedded in the digital credential. That normalized information is what has to be for everyone. The learning outcomes, the contents, the profile of the facilitators, the teaching strategy, the assessment, the workload. Those kinds of components, of course, they might be there. But then when we talk about the alignment to the labor market, then it depends on the context, you know? Sometimes it's bottom up and the state is the one who said, I would like these areas to be considered. Sometimes it's, I'm a university in a specific context, and today we were talking about a city that is full of wineries, and you know that makes sense to make micro-credentials aligned to a new way of promote that industry. But then there are some criteria that I have taken note, digital infrastructure requirements. If you're going through micro-credentials, you have to consider digitalization of your institution. If you are not if you can't attain those digital infrastructure requirements, then you can work with micro-credentials because it's something called blockchain that allows you to create an NFT, a non-functionable token. That's something that that promotes that the owner of the credential will be the one who receives it, and no one can change that. There can't be fraudulent actions with that credentials. That's very important. And another thing is the interoperability of micro-credentials. It has to be portable. People has to exchange it in many platforms, you know, and those kinds of things are not considered, and they may be part of the internal quality assurance system. And of course, when going through an external quality assurance system, of course, you have to consider. In ISG, we have that model, and many of the standards that we are talking with in ISG about micro-credentials are related to these kinds of criteria.
Okay. Would you like to elaborate?
Sure. Still on? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so in Ontario, when we're thinking about efficiencies in quality assuring micro-credentials, we think about the trust that we have in the system and the trust that we have in our existing providers who already go through a very rigorous quality assurance process. And we think that in order to support the efficiencies and to reduce the burden on both the quality assurance agencies and those that are making applications to have their quality or to have their micro-credentials quality assured, that we can license institutions who seek license to provide Ontario micro-credentials. They're still able to provide micro-credentials, period, but an Ontario micro-credential, trademarked, would have to go through the quality assurance process. And that quality assurance process would include all of the elements that Ariana mentioned, which are critical for ensuring the recognition for employers, et cetera. It would also ensure that the micro-credential is appropriately leveled to the qualifications framework. And when you have that appropriate leveling to the qualifications framework and the distinct levels of credentials, then you can really support the stackability of programming. And it's because the institutions have that expertise in the leveling of determining this is a master's level, this is a diploma level, this is a degree level. You can trust that the recognition of those micro-credentials will be validated. And speaking to the legitimacy and the transferability of micro-credentials, which we also think is absolutely critical, again, for that learner protection, we, pardon me, we believe that in the internal quality assurance processes, it will be important for the institutions to integrate micro-credentials into their existing databases. So the same way that micro-credentials are offered is integrated into their existing platforms. And so their transcript that they create for a degree program would also be the transcript that they create for a micro-credential. And then that absolutely verifies the validity of them. It ensures that they are able to be transported into digital credential wallets and things of that nature. So, so the protection's that way.
Thank you. I know there is no micro-credentials in Japan, but maybe in terms of quality assurance, would there be any new methodologies or approach as being the ex-president of JUA?
Actually,
Please.
as I said, that your system is classical, but in a practical level, actually, people like that any kind of the program for reskilling or recurrent, because the runner already got some level in some field. Therefore, in addition to that, if he got or she got some reskilling program or recurrent program, that's usable. And then also there is no barrier in terms of the providers, and not only universities, but also the companies, doesn't matter, because this is a real or clear reskilling, recurrent. So that's already,
Okay.
diploma.
At least there's something that's good.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
very good. Actually,
Thank you.
In Japan even, there are many such cases. Okay, so the accumulation for the degree, no. Accumulation for the self-recurrent,
Okay.
that's probably okay, even in Japan.
But they are not accredited.
Yeah.
That's only maybe lacking. Thank you. Sylvia, let's close the second round with you, please.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more with the former speakers, especially for the reasons of quick digital verification, interoperability. Really, we need to relook at our quality assurance system. What I also want to add is just to say the existing quality assurance systems, although still useful, many of them, or might be all of them, were not designed taking into consideration the different learning pathways and mode of learnings that exist today. And for that reason, we really need to relook at them. We are also saying one of the reasons why we are embracing micro-credential is for the reasons of quick response to the labor market needs. And this could mean that employer approaching an institution, and therefore the traditional methods of quality assuring and accrediting might not be very relevant to this. So we need to find some models where institutions can already be, confirmed that institution A, B, C can develop micro-credential, internally quality assure them, and offer them. And we also need to quality assure not only the content, the certification, the assessment, and everything. Those do not exist in the current quality assurance system.
Thank you very much. I appreciate. Now, I have a question to the audience. How many quality assurance agencies in the room accrediting micro-credentials? Can we see the hands, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are together, so 5, 6. Okay, thank you. I think it's not surprising, as I said, by looking at these numbers, especially in the European context, and it seems that same in other parts of the world. So we have to work a lot on that. Okay, before I give you the floor, I think we have a lot to do and work and discuss about this, and we'll be waiting from UNESCO to give us some more guidelines, and then hopefully we'll get somewhere. So please feel free to ask questions, comments, and your experiences, challenges, best practices. Let's hear your voice. Thank you. We have microphones. Can someone do that for us? Maybe we can I have one of them? You can share. This one, that one. Can we have two? Yes, there's one lady there, please.
Thank you. My name is Shima. I'm from Pakistan. My question was, don't you think so if I'm a student, from a student point of view, again, accreditation is charging money, fee, some sort of fee. So when it's coming micro-credential is another way who are not going to the university, they are getting more money from them. Don't you think so?
You mean the cost will be added on the fee for student as an extra
Yeah,
burden?
that's what I am
Okay.
thinking.
Okay. So accreditation of program plus the accreditation of micro-credentials cost. Okay, that's interesting. Any comments, please? Colleagues, feel free.
I would just speak a little bit to the funding. I mean, because micro-credentials are small and they're flexible, you'd hope that the quality assurance process shouldn't be burdensome. And I think it's really important that we don't make it burdensome, because when you do, the institutions, the providers, they aren't going to be seeking it. They are currently doing just fine without us. They're still getting learners. So to make it reasonable for them to seek the legitimization of their programming through accreditation, validation is important. I don't necessarily think that the costs should be passed down to the learners themselves, but I will say that in the model that we're bringing into Ontario, there's actually a revenue generating opportunity for the institutions. So not through the learners themselves through tuition fees, but actually through partnerships with industry and employers, so that industry and employers would pay for the service of going through an institution's quality assurance process.
May I? There's another thing that I think that it's important. Many countries are going through integration of quality assurance processes. So maybe like under the umbrella of an accreditation process, you can go through the certification, as many countries are doing, of the internal quality assurance system. And if we are looking at the internal quality assurance systems in terms of accepting that the university is prepared to offer micro-credentials, then is two in ones, you know? You can do it in the same moment. So we don't need to include an extra process. We just need to integrate process. That's one of our challenges in terms of external quality assurance.
Yeah, I was saying maybe the institution, the higher education institutions should bear the cost because it will be really prestigious and they can attract more learners and it's an income generating area for them. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? We have 1, 2, 3. Okay, can we have the microphone, please? Here. First come, first serve. This gentleman there. And then Selva, and then Madam.
Davlet Kalanov, IQA Kazakhstan. Thank you very much for your very interesting discussion. My question is, how can more mechanisms be developed to ensure the similar quality of micro-credentials so that they can be recognized around the world? Thank you.
Tough question. Thank you.
I think that's a really important question. I mean, one is just getting micro-credentials recognized by the institutions and within the jurisdiction for stackability and recognition that way. But I guess your question also really goes to international credential recognition. And I should suspect that if we get to a point where we have a better model for, or we achieve the goals that we have for international credential recognition, and that the jurisdictions that are engaged in it have qualifications frameworks and the micro-credentials aligned to the qualifications frameworks, that matching, that comparability should facilitate recognition.
Thank you. I think we'll get the question. Oh, sorry. We'll get the questions, and then we would like to also hear from those agencies who are doing micro-credentials accreditation. That will be really appreciated. Yes, sorry, Sylvia, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say we can also achieve, I think, what we are doing in the Southern African region. That's the reason why we are developing a common framework so that we all have the same quality. But we are also, as a continent, we are also participating in an initiative by the Commonwealth of Open Learning, where there is a development of a micro credit transfer system for micro-credentials. So that would at least also help to make sure that there are uniform quality across the board.
Thank you. Yes, please, Selma.
Sorry about that. My question actually is to, I forgot, Miss US.
Jay is glad to answer.
Hey, wow. 2025.
There is a company called Lightcast. Are you aware of that? Lightcast in the United States actually does a research on what Ariana was saying, neither employment nor the education. And how they actually did is they have a database, and that database includes all these lack of skill sets for the future. It's a costly one, but you know. Say one more time. Onguni.
Sorry, no, I was.
Oh, you are. I thought he was telling me something. I'm sorry. Sorry, wrong gestures. So that database actually includes all the future job opportunities or where the skills are lacking. And in Turkey, actually, we have this new project that we're running right now, and using that database to employ or offer some of these programs. So that might be something to consider, creating the micro-credential programs. And the second thing is, Ariana was talking about this, that when we were doing the micro-credential programs, actually, I haven't heard anybody talk yet that actually the students, the high school students, tells us exactly how they want their education. And we have to talk to them because this new generation knows exactly what they want. And the traditional Japanese system, I'm sorry, is not working for them. Even in Japan, it's not working for them. So they actually don't want to go to school anymore. They don't want to go to university, but they do want the education. And I think that's something that we need to talk about, how the high school students, once the micro-credentials work for them, they don't want to graduate in 4 years. They don't care. They say, I want to educate myself, but I can be graduated in 10 years, as long as I make money. I know, I'm finishing up right there.
I am getting lots of warning about the
so
time.
we need to talk about these among the micro-credentials. Thank you.
Very, very brief comments, and then I think.
Just trying to bring the concept of flexible learning pathways. Points of entry and re-entry in all ages, in all levels, and linking formal, non-formal, and informal education. Yeah. That's the future of education.
That's a good summary. Thank you, Ariane. I appreciate that. I think I was told that really for the sake of this transfer and the gala dinner arrangement, buses and so forth, we have to unfortunately close the session. So on behalf of all of you, I really thank the dear panelists. Let's give them a big hand, please. Applause. Appreciate that. And any announcement, logistic announcement? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate being here with us until 6 o'clock, and lots of discussions. Maybe we'll continue over the dinner or tomorrow, next day. Thank you.
Okay, it will be short. Thank you very much, Olgun. Yes, so very short announcements. So dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, so you know that it's a perfect time to relax and enjoy the gala dinner in great company today. So may I present this evening's four-step methodology, a touch of quality assurance elegance around 4 verbs: walk, watch, eat, and move. Walk. So at exactly 6:30 p.m., we'll begin with a short stroll to the gala dinner venue, because punctuality is part of the process. This is quality assurance after all. So level 4, we'll walk there. Watch. Upon arrival, we will be treated to a traditional Japanese performance, a moment to observe, reflect, and appreciate the cultural richness of our host country, Japan. After all, what is quality assurance without fully embedding the cultural context? Eat. We'll then savor what promises to be an even more delightful buffet than those we have already enjoyed. Wait for this one. From learning outcomes to eating outcomes. Tonight, we will assess satisfaction in a very practical ways. And move. Because what would be an inquiry gathering be without a bit of dancing? After a day of quality standards and frameworks, it's time to shift from quality assurance to rhythm assurance. So, earlier today, our friend Paul Leblanc invited us to reflect on how AI may prompt us to ask, what makes a good life? Well, thanks to the incredible hospitality of JUA, the generous support of our Japanese and Indian sponsors, and the dedication of JUA team, I think tonight we may have part of the answer. Let's enjoy it together. Thank you very much.